decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
I apologize to Dave Minuk. I interrupted him to start the show. Dave, would you like to finish your thought about the new Netflix hit, Jewish Matchmaking?
Yeah, Drew, I thought you were excellent in it.
Thank you very much. So that's what was going on behind the scenes this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. That, and of course, a nice visit from Ezzy's children. So things are off to a roaring start this morning.
You guys are my
kids made some good points. I thought they were articulate, Ezzy. They had some good insight into the Leafs collapse and where the Jets need to go. So I thought your kids really brought their A game to the pre-show this morning.
I agree. Ruben's take on the Leafs-Panthers series was bang on. I mean, the Leafs needed to get more pucks on the net. They needed to score more goals, right? That's essentially what happened in that game, right? So, yeah, I think we'll bring Ruben back on to tell us what he thinks the Jets should do in the offseason, and then maybe, Ariella will come down a little bit later and break down the Ice Thunderbird series. His analysis is definitely going to be better than Dave M's, who was actually in the building.
No question about it. With that nonsense out of the way, we say good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg. I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple of hours, here to talk about the Winnipeg Jets, their off season, some of the key moves facing the team. We'll touch on the Moose end of season. Dave M has been rolling out those interviews, just dribs and drabs of them, building the anticipation all week long with his great Moose coverage. And of course, the Winnipeg Ice victorious last night by the skin on their chinny chin after taking a 3-0 lead in the game. They held on to beat the Thunderbirds 3-2. Dave M will tell us what was going on there as well. We say a good morning, gentlemen. It's nice to see you both on this Saturday morning.
What's up, boys? I guess Dave's a little camera shy right now, but
I wasn't sure. Usually you go first, Ez.
Okay, it's okay. You can also go first, but
plus Spence, he says he wants to be matched up with a nice little Jewish boy. I thought that was a natural segue for you.
I'm not even gonna.
And then he said, "Oops, I meant large and hairy, not cute and little."
Spency and I have to still get together here.
You've heard of the movie Dinner with Andre? Dinner with Ezzy, I think, featuring Spency and Ezzy on a date. I think who wouldn't watch that? I think
I'll video it. I'll be there for long.
Yeah, we might let some cameras in, but yeah, boys, what's going on? It's a little bit quiet when it comes to the Jets news, but it's definitely not quiet in the hockey world. Dave M will, I'm sure, give his take on the game last night. Looked like a nice little crowd at Canada Life Center, and that was the right decision, right? Because they only announced that, what was it, on Monday or Tuesday?
Monday,
that games 1 and 2 are going to be played there, and why not take advantage, right, Dave? Like there's nothing else happening at Canada Life Center, and I mean, this is it, right? This is the WHL final. A ticket to the Memorial Cup is on the line, right? And as Drew mentioned, the Ice get the first win, but yeah, when you're talking about the Leafs and Panthers, guys, I mean, I know we're going to focus on the Jets here today, but Jesse Pollock's coming up in about 25 minutes, and the timing is fortuitous, as they say, because I don't know if you guys saw Jesse. He wasn't afraid to let Leafs fans know about their chant after round 1. So, what a goal by Nick Cousins! But definitely another season of disappointment in Toronto Maple Leafs land.
More than the goal. Sorry, Dave, but I don't know if you saw it last night. Did you see? It was on Twitter. It's floating around. We're not going to talk about the Leafs, but you know what I'm going to talk about, Dave. I think Radko Gudas screaming in the face of the Maple Leafs goaltender after scoring. Ezzy, he's got a beard that, of course, puts your beard to shame, and he is a big, tall, violent man when he needs to be, sometimes illegally so. And Justin Hall is not the world's largest goaltender, but he looked even smaller.
Joseph Wall.
Joseph Wall.
Joseph Wall and Justin Hall might be the same person, Drew. So I think you're excused.
Thank you. You knew what I meant, but it was a hell of a photograph, and we've been publishing the great photographs that Colby Spence and all of our photographers have been taking all year long on our Instagram, and it just goes to show you, sometimes you don't see things when you're watching the game that it takes a still photograph to really show you. And that was one of those, Pulitzer Prize winning photographs as he's screaming in exuberance. And then in the background, you see Leafs fans like this and in dismay. And he's just over the top screaming at the Leafs goaltender.
Well, I mean, it is somewhat relevant. I know before people accuse us of having a Leafs lunch, sort of Leafs morning, Leafs brunch, I should say. It is relevant because the Leafs were eliminated in Florida advance. The Jets draft pick went from 19 to 18. Woo. So it is relevant for Jets fans in that it is a boost in terms of that. So Paul Maurice doing one final solid for Jets Nation, giving them an increase of 1 in terms of drafting. So it was relevant. That's why we can bring it back to Jets land, Drew, in that, like I said, on illegalcurve.com, the Jets now will be drafting 18th overall, which is where they've drafted, of course, before. Technically they had the 22nd pick in 2016, as they moved up in Buffalo to get the Logan Stanley at 18. That was that trade they made with the Philadelphia Flyers. And then they had the 18th overall pick in 2021, although it was technically 17 because, of course, the Coyotes were punished and lost their first round pick. So the Jets were technically 18th, but actually made the 17th overall selection. So Jets have some history.
And that's where they took Chaz Lucius, of course.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's some history there.
Yeah, so I would say it was a good news, bad news week sort of for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, not a lot happening as we're sort of in that lull after the season ends, and most of the teams that have been eliminated at this point, unless they had made wholesale changes to their front office and are now announcing new structures like they did in Philadelphia earlier this week, and we'll touch on that later on in the show. Not a lot of news out of the Jets. I guess the good piece of news, of course, is for Connor Hellebuyck, as he's named a Vezina Trophy finalist for I think the third time in the last 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. So that certainly is a boon in his cap and just a further acknowledgement of how important he is to the Winnipeg Jets. I've seen a lot of people.
Poor UC Saros, by the way, boys.
Well, I was going to say,
I mean, Ilya Sorokin and Linus Ullmark are unbelievable goaltenders. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to see who wins this, because unlike in some previous years, right? Like, I don't think you would say that Hellebuyck or Ullmark is the runaway favorite, right? Like, right. I would probably give it to Hellebuyck, to be honest with you. But what a season for UC Saros, right? Like, he almost single-handedly keeps them in the playoff race, right, Dave? And he isn't even a finalist. And obviously, who really cares about these awards at the end of the day? But I just thought, like, a lot of people expected Saros to at least be a finalist.
Yeah, I think there was
my guess would be he'd be the fourth guy who finished on the ballot. It would be my
and after the NHL awards, they'll come out and it'll be interesting to see how close it actually was and everything else, because UC Saros certainly kept the Predators afloat for so long after the trade deadline. So that's the good news for Connor Hellebuyck, and time will tell if he ends up winning his second Vezina Trophy or not. I don't expect him to win, but again, like you said, Ezzy, it's not something we're going to rip our hair.
I expect Ullmark to win, but I think Hellebuyck probably should win. But do
you read anything into the fact that all three Vezina Trophy finalists didn't make it out of the first round?
No, it's a regular season award.
It's definitely a regular season award. But I mean, does it just sort of further exemplify how the playoffs are a different animal, especially as it pertains to goaltending?
Absolutely. And I mean, Jesse Pollock put this out on Twitter. It wasn't yesterday. It was more, I think it was last week, about the goaltenders left, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you look at Carolina, Freddie Anderson, the Devils with Akira Schmid. And obviously,
the Devils are out, Ezzy. The Devils are out.
I know.
I don't know if you knew, but the Devils. Dave, did you hear the Devils are out?
I did hear that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that Ezzy knows that the Devils are out, because I'm not 100% sure if he's aware that the Devils are out.
I deserve that. I'll take that. I mean, I can take it, just like I would be dishing that out to you if we were talking about your favorite team. But you're right. I mean, but
look, Wildcats.
The Hurricanes are an amazing team, and I can pat myself on the back here. Mm-hmm. It's not the Stanley Cup final, but I did pick the Hurricanes to go to the Stanley Cup final. I wasn't alone. Dave did as well, and many others. I mean, when you consider, no Max Pacioretty, no Andrei Svechnikov, Rod Brind'Amour is the best coach in the league, in my opinion. And the Hurricanes, that's what they do. The Carolina Hurricanes, they do well in the playoffs year after year, right? But to Drew's point about the goaltending, look no further than the Panthers Leafs series that ended yesterday, right, guys? Like, Joseph Woll was not who you expected to be in net for game 5. You thought it would be Ilya Samsonov. And I think Woll was really impressive. He looks like he's a part of the future in goal for the Leafs, Dave. But look no further than Woll and Bobrovsky, right? Like, Sergei Bobrovsky had a very average, if not below average, regular season. And he's come in, and, Alex Lyon was the starting goaltender for the Panthers in round 1. And Bobrovsky has really been the story, in addition to, Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett and Carter Verhaeghe. The names go on and on. The Panthers are an impressive team. This team won the President's Trophy last year. Like, this team isn't a flash in the pan. But yeah, I think to your point, Drew, the 3 Vezina finalists all being knocked out in the first round just shows you how this year is definitely not the year of the goaltender, in terms of the goalies that had success in the regular season and then translating that into the playoffs.
Yeah, the only goaltender left in the playoffs that you would really say is a grade A quality goaltender that sort of jumps to mind is Ottinger in Dallas. Yeah. Everybody else, you look at what, Laurent Brossoit goes out injured in Vegas. And so now
Vegas used 5 goalies. So they're not
exactly.
a good, so Carolina is the same.
Yeah.
It's got Grubauer in Seattle.
Yeah. And then Edmonton is flipping back and forth between Campbell and Skinner. So it is sort of a bizarre year when it comes to the playoff teams and their goaltending situation.
And Ottinger hasn't exactly been, stellar. Ottinger's been good, but he just in terms of series. He's been very up and like we've talked about it, right? Like, you've been seeing a lot of 3 and 4 goal deficits, right? So I think Ottinger's been good, but it's really, to me, the story of that series has been Dallas's offense, right? Led by Rupe Hintz and Joe Pavelski, and then the resurgent Jamie Benn, right? So even Jake Ottinger, who I would agree with you, Drew, definitely a top 10 NHL goalie. He hasn't been stealing a lot of games. I admit I haven't been watching a ton of that series, but I don't think he's stolen really any games in that series.
No, but exactly right. As Dave said, the games haven't, by and large, most of the games in the second round have been, blowouts. Either been, really close overtime games, or they've been large margin of defeats. So it's been a bizarre second round, but we don't need to get. We'll get more into it as we go on the show. We talked about Hellebuyck as the good news story of the week, and that's not really going to change anything aside from get Hellebuyck even more money when he hits UFA status a year from now, and that's obviously going to be a huge topic of conversation this summer and ongoing, and his future here in Winnipeg, if it's a long-term one or if it's a short-term one. But then there was the news that Dave M really brought to the forefront, not that some other people in the media gave him the respect and the credit that he deserved, but Leon Gawanke, a guy that had a great year for the Manitoba Moose, Dave, and you can speak to it because you watched him more than anyone else did in the city of Winnipeg, signs a 4-year contract to go home and play in the German Elite League. Now, what was your level of surprise, I would say, regarding this? Because this is a guy that people sort of saw his numbers this year. They saw steady improvement. Granted, he's on the older side of being a prospect, but, to sort of wave the white flag on your NHL career was, to me, a little bit of a surprising decision.
Yeah, I really thought the next decision, when we talked to him on Monday, and obviously he didn't get, it's not like he said, "Hey Dave, just so you're aware, this is going to be taking place." I honestly thought the next bit of news with him was that he'd be joining Germany. I asked him about that. He said nothing, it wasn't official yet, but
at the World Hockey Championship,
at the World Championship,
is what Dave is talking about.
Yeah.
He's not joining Germany as a nation. He's already German.
He's joining the German parliament is what it is. He's giving up on his hockey career, and he's now running for whatever the what's it called, the prime minister,
chancellor.
I don't think is it chancellor?
Well, there's a chancellor.
Chancellor Angela Merkel. Or she used to be the chancellor.
Used to be. Anyways, the point is that I was anticipating that would be the next bit of news with respect that he'd be going to Latvia or Finland to take place in the World Championship with Team Germany. And yeah, you're right, Drew. It was a little bit of a surprise to see that report and have it confirmed that he's going to Adler Mannheim for 4 years. He did it. Look, he passed through waivers. He's a 2017 draft pick on the right side. Jets don't, of course, have a ton of depth that's ready to make that jump. Simon Lundmark just finished his the 2019 second rounder. He just finished his second full season here in North America. You got Tyrell Bauer, the 2021 sixth rounder, as he the right side. but that's and then you've got the next.
That sounds right, by the way. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he was drafted 2 years ago.
Yeah, and then you've got obviously Dmitry Kuzmin, who's coming in the third rounder from 2021, I think. So he's coming from playing in the OHL with the Flint Firebirds. But again, those are all very young guys. So if you needed to make a recall on that right side, Leon Gawanke to me would have been the next guy.
Bauer was 2020, just.
Oh, 2020. Okay. So
to do a little housekeeping.
Yeah, exactly. So
you don't do any housekeeping at your own house. Why are you doing housekeeping here?
Anyway, so the point is that it was definitely a bit of a surprise to see that he made the decision. I thought the organization made a mistake. I've been vocal about this. I think that in game 82 of the season, when the Moose were, I don't remember where the Moose were, if they were even in action at that point, but I thought the Jets
were on the road, weren't they? At the end of the year, the Moose were on the road, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's right, because they made a recall from the road trip. That's right. They were ended, I think, in they started in Texas and then ended in like Rockford and Chicago. The end of the season in Chicago. But the point is that I thought they could have recalled Gawanke, given him one NHL game. I thought that was a mistake by them. They've done that before with guys. Brendan Kitchen comes to mind in 15-16. And they were on that California road trip, and Paul Maurice played like Mark Stewart in the last game of the season. And then Kitchen, it was crazy because the Moose flew home, or the Jets flew home, that morning after being eliminated from California. So they arrived like 4 a.m, and Kitchen played the Moose game that afternoon. But you could the impact it has on these guys when you don't give them that little bit of a reward for being a good soldier, I think was in my mind, it was a mistake with Leon because he's been a good soldier and he produced this year. He scored 20 goals for your organization at the AHL level. Is his defense great? No, his defense isn't great. But I think you want to see what he can do at the NHL level. It's a meaningless game to me. So, and you had the room to make a recall. You had the numbers to make a recall. You recall the guy, you play him in one game, you give him that sort of incentive. He goes into the playoffs for the Moose, does whatever he does, goes home, trains hard for the summer. To me, I just think it's a bit of a mistake in the sense that you're not rewarding the guys who are good soldiers in your organization. And to me, like to play Neil Pionk so he could play 82 games is stupid. It's meaningless. And not only that, it's kind of a stupid risk because the reality is if he gets hurt in that game against Colorado, you now have a guy who's injured in a meaningless game. So you could arbitrarily play him in 82 games. Same with Brendan Dillon. So I'm just saying that I personally would have pulled one of those guys out. I would have put Gawanke in. You get him his first NHL game. And then you've got a guy who's got a little confidence going into the summer versus versus feeling like I'm never getting my shot after setting the Moose record for most goals by a blue liner. And that's a Moose record for the 1.0 Moose or the 2.0 Moose.
I agree with you about giving him the shot. I mean, I think there's no downside to it. I was surprised the Jets played as many regulars as they did in that game in Colorado at the end of the year. So I don't have an argument with you there. I do think, though, that the writing was that this has probably been in the works. I mean, I don't think this just sort of happened. This signing a 4-year deal in Germany just sort of happened between the end of the Moose season and the exit interviews.
No, that's fair.
This has probably been, he was heading down this path probably for a number of weeks or months at this point.
I think they were soliciting him. I don't know that he necessarily was. I don't think he was like, okay, as soon as my Moose season's over, I'm signing this deal. I believe that, I think that they were, from my understanding, and Ezzy, we're not going to start covering the DEL here on a legal curve, but
you might,
but maybe never say never. But I think that my understanding for Adler Mannheim is that this is kind of their MO, is that when they have a down year, they go out and get, try and get a big signing. And of course, a Berlin-born player, getting him over there to play in their organization, especially after the season he just had. I think that's kind of, they've been on trying to sign him. I don't know that authoritatively, but just from what I've seen, it appears to be something they've been actively pursuing. So I mean, I think it's in his mind. But again, like to me, it's curious because I really believe that he would have been an option next year, to force him to make a decision. And even if he comes to North America, comes back to Winnipeg, does training camp and gets put on waivers, he's not getting through waivers. He's getting claimed. Some team is going to give him a shot. So he would have at least gotten an NHL. That's why, to me, I don't understand why he wouldn't have got it. He was an FA with arbitration rights. I don't know why you don't just gut out a 1 more year deal and then say, okay, now I'm going to go back because, you're making, he was making 125 at the AHL level. So you'd make a little bit more money next year. And again, you get your shot either within this organization or another one has. And then if it doesn't happen, if you actually pass your waivers, so you give it one more shot, and then because you probably most likely would have been able to get in the lineup, I think next year.
There's a few things here. Drew is absolutely right when he says that, Adler Mannheim didn't just, a week ago decide, I think let's sign Leon Gawanke, right? Like that's not how this works. No. And you're right, Dave, when you talk about, he probably should have been given that game, regardless if the Jets knew that he was going to go and play with Adler Mannheim. But I think the bigger picture here, guys, is Jets prospect development and asset management right here. Like this is, to me, is the bigger issue here. In a year in which you lost Michael Eyssimont on waivers, and then he goes and he obviously ends up in Tampa and signs, I forget if it was a 1 or 2 year deal, but it was a 2 year deal. There you go. And good for Mikey Eyssimont, right? Because Drew mentions, Gawanke is an older prospect. So is Michael Eyssimont. But that doesn't, that happens all the time, guys. Like, just because, first off, to call a guy old at 24 or 25 years old is really funny to me, right? Because, in the grand scheme of things, that's not old at all. Guys just develop differently. Look at a guy like Brandon Tanev, right? Like, Brandon Tanev didn't establish himself as an NHLer until, 23, 24? And then look at him right now. Like, he's still thriving, right? So I think, in a year in which not only did you lose Eyssimont, but you lost Johnny Kovacevic on the fourth, on the third pairing guy or a seventh or eighth defenseman, whatever you want to call him, to the Montreal Canadiens, right? So obviously Leon Gawanke is replaceable, Dave.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why it's curious and maybe troubles some people, Jets fans namely, is that you had a player who was on the rise. That's the thing here. We could sit here all day, and I obviously, can't, analyze a prospect, I especially considering I haven't watched Gawanke as much as Dave has, but the Jets development staff, those are the ones that, ultimately make these decisions. But, Dave mentioned it, 20 goals in the AHL. That's not easy to do. Like, that's impressive. Mm-hmm. So Gawanke might not have been a top 6 defenseman for the Jets, but the point is he gives them an option there on the right side. Like, that's depth. That's a stable of prospects that you have, that if you have an injury, right? Like if somebody on the second or third pair gets injured, maybe Gawanke is a guy that you call up and he gets an opportunity. So none of us are sitting here saying that, Gawanke was going to win the Norris Trophy. That's not what anybody's saying, but we're saying that you had a pretty good young, and I use the term young, realizing that he's 24 years old, but that's the point. And then you essentially lost him for nothing. Like, so you spent all of this time developing him in the American Hockey League, and then he goes to Germany. So that's the third player this year, third prospect, if you want to call Michael Eyssimont a prospect, because he was. The Moose signed him on a pro contract, but he was a prospect. So you lost 3 players for nothing.
Also, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby became a Group 6 UFA because of the playing time issue.
And Jonsson-Fjällby, and Dave and I talked about this a few weeks ago when Dave posted. And give Dave credit. Dave is the one that's breaking this news here. I don't think a lot of other people before Dave knew that Axel Jonsson-Fjällby could have been an RFA if he played one more game. But Jonsson-Fjällby, to me, I think he was making $700,000, if I'm not mistaken, at the NHL level.
Yeah,
I'm perfectly fine.
750, but
$750. If Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, let's say he gets a raise to $850 or something, or $900, it doesn't matter. The point is that I would have no problem if Jonsson-Fjällby is kind of your quote unquote 13th, 14th forward, right? And that was a role that was played by Dominic Toninato a couple of years ago. And I think Dave would agree now that Toninato signed that 2-year deal. You could be looking at the next Moose captain here, right? So I think that when you're talking about Jonsson-Fjällby or Leon Gawanke or Eyssimont, whoever, Kovacevic, I think the situation was mishandled a little bit, because Jonsson-Fjällby is a guy, 25 years old. Let's not, kid ourselves. He's not going to be a top 6 forward. He's never going to score 25 or 30 goals at the NHL level. But this is a guy that I think has like a usefulness on this team. He can be a fourth line guy, give you energy. What did he have? 6 goals this year with the Jets, something like that. Like, I think
4 to 6, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, something like that. And again, he's replaceable, but I don't think that's the point here. I think the point is that you would have just had a player. There you go. 6 goals. That's not bad. 6 goals in 50 games or something for the Jets. So
exactly, 50 games on the nose.
Yeah. So it's just again, I don't think Gawanke is a guy that you're going to lose sleep over if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff. But I just think that this came a little bit out of left field, because, as Dave said, that was your top prospect on the right side.
Well, that's really where your issue is. You look at the Jets' depth, and you talked about some of the players that they've drafted, the defensemen. Well, these guys aren't ready to be NHL players if push comes to shove, if the need comes to be. There is not a lot of organizational depth on that right side. And, sure, you can go out and you can acquire some free agents, but most of the free agents that the Jets, are acquiring are not guys who are necessarily going to be regulars. I mean, that's just sort of the reality of a lot of the guys who sign here is your sort of, hope and a prayer for a lot of them that they can turn into something more than what they already are. But if injuries happen, and they always do, you just don't have a ton of depth on the right side. Now, there's not a ton of depth on the right side for most teams on the back end in the league. So that's sort of a bit of the saving grace. I think that's unless the only exception to that, I believe, is the Los Angeles Kings, who have
aren't all their D right shot guys?
And that's why everyone's sort of looking at them as a team, to watch this offseason, because they have this glut of right side defensemen.
Yeah, Brad Clark is one of those guys. Right.
That a lot of teams who are in the need of right side D would be interested in acquiring. But, so I just think it's I have to believe that that isn't ignorance on the Jets' part, that they know the roster status and the contractual status of all of these guys. I certainly assume and hope that's the case.
They absolutely do. I mean, nobody's going, oh, I didn't realize that Eric Comrie needed 90 more minutes, or that actually Janssen Vielby needed one more game to be retained. I mean, look, and the fact of the matter is, you can always sign these guys after the fact, and it's not as if a guy has lost, you don't get the chance to look. They could have re-signed Eric Comrie. They could have re-signed they can re-sign Janssen Vielby. So it's ultimately, it's not so much. Those aren't the ones that you're super concerned about. Eric Comrie different than Janssen Vielby. The Janssen Vielby one doesn't really bother you, but yeah, it's as he just said, you've put the time, the effort, and the money into drafting these guys. And to me, again, like I said, organization. Look, the NHL is a reward, for hard work, and sometimes it's need. Sometimes, again, like I said, sometimes they don't have a choice. But this organization, ultimately, Drew, I think what you're getting at, and we can talk about it obviously later, but I think the organization has to realize, like, listen, guys, we have decisions to make, because next year, now, you have Declan Chisholm, who's no longer waiver exempt, who was an AHL All-Star, is as probably on par with Ville Heinola. And I got to tell everyone, if you didn't watch the Ville Heinola end of season presser, you should, because he was excellent. And it was it really spoke to,
where can people find it?
LegalCurve.com. LegalCurve.com.
What about that big body check in the corner? I forget if that was game 3 or game 4, Dave. You clipped it. I love that hit.
Yeah, he smoked Luke Evangelista, like killed him. Luke Evangelista became Linda Evangelista after that one, because what was her name? Was that her name? Wasn't that the lady, the actress?
Yeah, Linda Evangelista.
Yeah, okay,
she's an actress. Right. Yeah, you got that one right.
All right. I want to make
sure.
I
was thinking Linda Ronstadt.
Yeah, no,
she's a singer.
Yeah,
that's completely different. But
okay,
also a good effort on your part, Ezzy.
Anyway, so the point is that
none of us are going to be on Jeopardy anytime soon.
No.
Yeah, there you go. Anyways, let's head to break.
Let's head to break. When we come back, Jesse Pollock is going to join us for more Jets talk. We're talking about the Jets. We're talking about the playoffs. It's a Saturday morning. You're live with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit Rolly's.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly, see lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Bottom of hour number one. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and our good friend from TSN's Bar Down, Jesse Pollock, joins us on the program now. Jesse, how are you, brother? Good to see you. I'm glad you made it out alive last night. How close have you ever come to getting hit?
Last night actually came pretty close to getting hit.
Okay, tell the story. Tell the story.
First of all, fellas, thank you for having me. I'm feeling absolutely.
It's our pleasure.
I'm feeling, you know what? Okay, I love the ads, by the way. The Raleigh's, what is it? Raleigh's transfers?
Yeah, Raleigh's moving. As he's getting crushed by a piano. He's been crushed by that piano for a while now.
Oh,
I really think Dr. Les Rikus was my best work. That's just my own personal opinion, but Raleigh's was also very good.
They're all great. I'm honestly feeling great this morning. Couldn't be better, actually, that the Leafs are out. Oh, their salty fans deserved it. They deserved to lose last night. And last night I was leaving, and here's an example of one. I didn't even do anything. This guy just, I guess, watches Bar Down and knows what I do, obviously. And he was upset and started saying using some really bad language towards me. And he started getting up in my face, and security had to get involved, and people were filming it. And I got the nicest compliment last night, guys. I obviously had to go out with some friends last night and celebrate the Leafs losing. and this guy came up to me. I think he's like 23, and he said, "Man, I just want to let you know, honestly, as a Leafs fan, you might be the greatest troll in hockey." And I was like, thank you.
It's the little things in life, right? You're getting that kind of acknowledgement. Very important. I'm sure that it was.
But that's music to Jesse's ears, right? That's what I mean. People appreciate what you're doing. I mean, it's all fun. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, you do it in a way that's not offensive to anybody, and obviously people take it way too seriously. And obviously we love it because we're Winnipeggers and we know you, right? But yeah, I love it. That's the thing. Like, you should never take it to a level where it gets physical or you start insulting someone or anything like that, right? Like, standing there saying that, we want Florida, I mean, was just, it was amazing. And I kept thinking after Nick Cousins scored that goal, I'm like, thank God that we have Jesse on the show tomorrow. Like, the timing could not be better.
I'll be honest. I'm surprised that nobody's hit you yet. I mean, I mean, people lose their minds when it comes to sports. Especially, I'm sure that you've seen the video. There was the Rangers fan who punched the Devils Spirit Squad guy a couple times. I mean, people lose their minds, especially when somebody who's doing it, right in their face. So I mean, the fact
Jesse can handle himself though, and you can't touch him. He's like Floyd Mayweather, Drew. You can't he'll juke and jive. Like, you can't touch him.
I readily acknowledge that Jesse's a big boy, and the hours in the gym have paid off. But still, that doesn't mean somebody with a little bit of liquid courage doesn't decide to call their shot every now and then, for better or worse.
You know what? I gotta give a shout out to the Leafs fans, because as much as I can't stand them, and really the ones who are the worst are the ones who just hide behind a keyboard, and all these people say to me, "I dare you to come to Maple Leaf Square. See what happens to you." I show up next time. People are asking to take photos. We're having fun. It's all in good fun. Like, I really do it's a love-hate relationship with Leafs fans. it's a hate relationship with them on Twitter. It's a love relationship when I see them in person. Although the guy last night it's kind of rare. I don't know. I just it's so funny. Someone commenting that I need a posse. If you guys want to come down to Toronto for the next playoff run, maybe you guys will be my posse. Just like
somehow I would suggest you get a better and more intimidating posse than us. I'm just going to throw that out there. Jesse,
just get your brothers, Jesse. You've got 2 big brothers. They'll take care of you.
They'll be the posse. Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, that was all fun and games last night, but the focus of us and I know your passion, of course, for the Winnipeg Jets. So, a disappointing end to the year, a controversial end to the media availabilities, and all the noise surrounding this team. From your perspective, where does this team go from here at this point? Is it time for, the rebuild is off the table. They've said such. So how does this team, given all that was said after Game 5 against Vegas, given all that's been said between the players and the coach and the management, how does this team get back on track, my good friend?
It's such a great loaded question. And I think that there are so many different things to take into consideration. First of all, I obviously need to point out I'm not a player and I'm not a manager. So it's so hard. Like, I guess I'll just give my perspective as a fan. If I were the manager, I would say we probably should blow it up. We probably should trade all of our players, start fresh. We've got some good prospects, build around them going forward. We've shown that, I don't know if this core is necessarily good enough to take it to the next step. I'd like to think they are, but they haven't shown that they are. And all the players keep saying, oh, I don't want, I want to run it back. We're good enough. We're good enough. Well, it's like, you guys got to show Chevy and everyone that we should be running it back. And, obviously some bad injuries this year. We could have put up a better fight against Vegas, but they haven't really shown why we shouldn't blow it up necessarily. And on one hand, it makes sense to blow it up. On the other, we do have a great core, and maybe Chevy just says, screw it. I need to go all out, and I'm going to do it. And this could be my last year with the Jets. And I'm going to trade prospects. I'm going to make the best possible roster and see how far we can go with this team, because the core seems to think that they can do it. So, and it's also just weird because, on one hand, we could blow it up, but on the other, you have the organization obviously sending out that message, which everyone was kind of like, what's going on here?
Right.
Saying we need ticket sales. We need people coming in the seats. And especially to send something out like that now, how are the Jets expected to do a rebuild and risk having even less people in the seats watching games when they are saying we need people in the stands? So it's like, I feel like for a while, the Jets have kind of had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. We're always kind of competitive, but we're not mortgaging our future too much, because we want to stay competitive so we can have fans continue coming to our games. So I think Kevin Cheveldayoff has the hardest job, obviously, goes without saying, in the league. So many players don't want to come to Winnipeg. I'm sure he's being told different things, how to manage it. I would imagine that it's not just him making all the decisions, and it's tough. I mean, if I'm Chevy at this point, if I'm Chevy for his own sake, I'm making a lot of moves this summer, and I'm just going for it all in if I'm not rebuilding, because it's like, oh my God, imagine if we have the same situation that happened this year and then we don't get anything for any of our players. What a disaster.
I think you make a lot of good points, Jesse. And the guy that I want to focus in on, I mentioned you earlier. I'm not sure you would remember because you tweeted it, but I think it was last week. It might have been, a few days ago, but all the days, as you know, sometimes they seem like they're one day, right? But you were mentioning the goalies that are left, right? And the best example is the series that we just talked about with the Leafs and the Panthers, right? Joseph Woll is not who you expected to be in a must-win Game 5 for the Leafs, right? Same thing with Sergei Bobrovsky. Obviously, with the Spencer Knight situation, Alex Lyon was starting in Game 1 in the first round, and then Bobrovsky obviously took over. But whether it's, Akira Schmid with the Devils, who obviously, Vitek Vanacek was your number one goalie in round 1 against the Rangers, and then Schmid took over. Everybody knows what happened there. But then, whether it's Freddie Anderson, whether it's Kochetkov, whether you want to talk about Philip Grubauer, who obviously didn't have, the best year last year with the Kraken, obviously, you know where I'm going with this. The goaltenders, is that a rabbit there or what is that?
No, it's not a rabbit. It's my girlfriend's dog. I'm sorry. I'm totally.
No. We welcome all animals on this show. We need to know more about the dog.
This is Harley. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, it's all good. I just saw Jesse. I just saw ears there. I wasn't sure what was going on. If that was a chinchilla, I just needed to know there. But the question I was going to ask you though, in relation to the goaltenders that are left in round 2 and Connor Hellebuyck, right? Because you're hearing this, you're seeing this, like you mentioned, you're talking to Jets fans all the time. Yeah. I mean, you're on social media a lot. People are talking a lot about Hellebuyck. The Devils were one team that people were throwing out there in terms of, possibly being interested in Hellebuyck. You hear the Red Wings, but the point I'm trying to make is with what's happened with, goal scoring being up and basically teams going with multiple goaltenders in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, does that change your view on what Chevy could do with Hellebuyck? Because obviously trading Connor Hellebuyck, you're arguably your MVP, a guy who's, been nominated for the Vezina 3 times in the last 5 years. You don't just trade Hellebuyck, on a whim. I mean, that's a big decision. But I guess going back to what I said, has that changed your opinion on whether or not the Jets might move Hellebuyck this offseason with what's going on in the landscape of goaltending here in the playoffs?
I think it's a great question, and it absolutely has. I love Helly, but I think changes are coming to the Jets that he's not going to want to deal with. And it almost seems like this marriage is coming to an end. And I feel like the Jets also have some good goalies in the pipeline. We could find another goalie who's going to be good for us. I just feel like it's going to happen. And it sucks to say that about Helly, obviously nominated for the Vezina, and he's the guy that you obviously want to build around. I think if you can keep a guy like Helly, it's great. But if we lose him and we can get a great value for him, and if the team is headed in a direction, okay, Harley, come on. If the team is heading, get comfortable here. Come on. If the team is heading in a direction where maybe it's not going to be as competitive, we have Mark Scheifele's contract coming to an end, Blake Wheeler's contract coming to an end. Who knows what's going to happen with Pierre-Luc Dubois? The writing's kind of on the wall that there are changes happening with the Jets. We're going to be ushering in a new chapter. I just don't really see Hellebuyck wanting to stick around for that. And it has changed my opinion because Harley, come on. Jesus, sorry guys.
It's all good. Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Jesse Pollock from TSN's Bar Down. Harley the dog joining us on the show.
Harley the
everything
Iggy.
To do about the Jets, the playoffs, everything under the sun.
Harley the Iggy. She's an Italian Greyhound, but no, yes, I do think that it's changed that, and I think that we could get a ton of value for Hellebuyck. And there are some teams with really solid cores that are coming. Some are coming to an end, some are just going. That could really use a Hellebuyck. Obviously the main one is the Pittsburgh Penguins. How about the Ottawa Senators? They're a team that could really use a guy like Hellebuyck. So.
The value might be worth the value in a trade might be worth more than keeping him around at this point.
Hellebuyck's value is never going to be higher, Drew.
Never. It'll never be higher, and it's so hard, even fathoming getting rid of a guy like Hellebuyck. But it just seems like I don't know. It just kind of seems like the writing is on the wall a little bit with Helly. I feel like you kind of see what's going to happen next year? We're just going to keep everyone and then we're just going to get no value for anyone? Something's got to happen here.
Jesse, you talk about the next one. You were cheering against the next one, Dominic DiVincentis, the 2022 seventh rounder for North Bay Battalion. I know you've got connectivity to the Peterborough Petes, so you were excited. But I did see some people saying, Jesse, how could you cheer against the future of Jets goaltending? And I don't want to get into that one so much. Although Dominic DiVincentis, OHL goalie of the year, he looks like a real deal for Jets fans a few years down the line, though. We're not talking about anytime soon. But speaking of keeping it to junior and keeping it to Winnipeg, the Winnipeg Ice. I mean, I went to the game last night. It was my first game of the season. And they, of course, moved it over to Canada Life. Over 5,500 people were in attendance to watch the Ice and Brad Lambert and the Seattle Thunderbird, do battle in the WHL Championship Series. Excellent game. But, what are your takeaways? Because I know you spent time with the ice. You made fun of Connor Geegee's knob and a lot of different things. And that's one of the things that's really, great about what you get to do is that you take people behind the scenes and you create a more human element to teams. So you make the Jets players more human, because we don't see that a lot, right? We see a lot of very structured videos coming from the team. So when you get an opportunity to do what you do, whether it's with junior hockey, which obviously there's a lot more latitude, or even NHL hockey, it provides fans or even media insight, I think, that we don't normally see traditionally through the teams themselves.
Thanks, Dave. It's awesome. What's really great is that TSN has just partnered with the CHL, which we never had the rights to. There's Sportsnet historically that has owned those rights. So I think it's really opened up a lot of avenues for what we can do with teams, players. I'm actually going to the Memorial Cup this year, which I'm really excited about. That's why I'm cheering so hard for the Winnipeg Ice as well. And there's just something really special about junior hockey. Obviously, Jets, my squad, love them. But, you kind of see some of the drama that happened at the end of the Jets year, and it makes you think, like, for me, I love the players, don't get me wrong, but I'll never be able to relate to like what they have to go through. But when I saw some of the comments that some Jets players are making, specifically by Wheeler, I was kind of a little like, give me a break. And these guys in junior hockey are so hungry to make it to where they want to be. They're so hungry to win in their league. They're so hungry to prove themselves. It's just so fun to be around these players. It's fun to watch these players being in those arenas. You feel it. It's a different energy where there's just so much. There's like so much on the line. It's hard to explain. So I got to go to an ice game when I was back. I got to go to a couple Jets games, which was game 3 of the Jets Vegas series. Was the best hockey game I've ever been to in my life. Even though we lost, it was unbelievable.
Shout out to Marty.
Yeah, hell yeah, hell yeah, rocking that turtleneck. But then, got to go to a Winnipeg Ice game a couple days later, and it was just such a special experience. They're such a good team, great organization, and they just, I don't know. I encourage everyone to go to Winnipeg Ice games. They're so much fun. Junior hockey is amazing. I think it's the talent specifically in the final. There's 17 NHL draft picks, not to mention what is it? Milic is Seattle's goalie. He was undrafted. And then Zach Benson obviously is going to be a top 10 pick. Like, go to those games, everyone. They are a great time.
Jesse, you talked about you talked about Wheeler's comments, and you didn't like them, and I don't think you're alone. And a lot of people didn't like him, and then there's the whole back and forth. And yet the team, the Jets, just seem to be willing to try and just push that all aside and start next year. The roster won't be the same, or at least I don't expect it'll be the same. But it's not like it's going to be torn down to its studs. That's just not the MO for the team. How much lingering impact do you think that the comments are going to have going into next season? I think that, they'll all try and put a good face on it and say, well, time, it heals all wounds and everything else. But from my perspective, that back and forth, which was so unprecedented and so unusual to see played out in front of cameras, it isn't something you can just sweep under the rug and say everything's hunky-dory and expect people aren't going to remember it and aren't going to point to it the next season as soon as something goes bad again.
Well, I think you're right. It was like a very strange way to see the season come to an end. I think clearly Bonus felt that way clearly a lot of fans felt the way that they were feeling for a long time. Mm-hmm. And again, it's so hard because I'm not a player, and I think Blake Wheeler as well, like, needs to be viewed a little differently, because like, this is a guy who, look at it from his perspective. He was a guy captain of the team for years. Then Bonus comes in, decides that he's no longer fit to be the captain of the team. And then Blake Wheeler, I'd say, held himself pretty well the whole year for the most part, given what happened. And then, obviously, I think he kind of hit a boiling point probably with Bonus, where he's like, okay, like, this is enough. Like, you took the C away from me, then you come in, you don't even address us as a team. I'm sure Blake Wheeler, like, I don't know. I'm sure he had maybe some negative feelings towards Bonus. I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I think for the most part, Blake Wheeler handled the whole year with class. But there's another side of looking at it. It's just like, okay, man, like Paul Maurice, who's doing great right now, good for him in Florida, we didn't really see him hold his players accountable too often. He's such a player's coach, and he, kind of defending a lot of his guys usually. And then Bowness comes in, holds Blake Wheeler accountable, who Blake Wheeler seemed like he had a very good relationship with Paul Maurice. And then it's just like he just complains about being held accountable. It's like, instead of saying I didn't like what Bowness did, he could have just been like, you know what, Bones raised some good points. I think we probably could have discussed things internally, but we're going to listen to what he said and we're going to build on it for next year. Instead, it's like you could just sense this frustration from him. And it was a bizarre situation. And I love what Bowness did. I love that he called the players out. There was absolutely no effort from the players in game 5, and they knew it. The players knew it. And there were some unfortunate injuries, but the Jets kind of just, Bowness expects more out of his players, and they didn't deliver in the second half of the season. And that's the bottom line. And if you can't handle your coach, who's the real leader of the team, calling you out like that, then come on, get real here. Just listen and build. You don't have to publicly complain about the way that your coach treated you. That's just, to me, if I was a player and I got called out by my coach like that, which I would have been okay, whatever. Bones could handle it differently, but it is what it is. Didn't have to create further dialogue with the whole thing.
I agree 100%. And that's what we talked about last week, Jesse. And, and especially after a couple of days, right? And those questions are coming, just downplay it, right? Just say that, yeah, we didn't play well. We understand why Bones was frustrated. And I think a lot of fans were wondering why players were showing more passion for what their coach said, as opposed to more passion for winning game 5, right? And I wanted to transition because a lot of the focus is on the Jets core 4, right? Everybody is wondering, is Wheeler going to be moved? Is Dubois going to be moved? We talked about Hellebuck. Scheifele's obviously the big one, but, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. Sent the guys yesterday, a topic for today's show, because a lot of people aren't talking about the Jets RFAs. And obviously, they're not all as significant as the next, but Dylan Samberg and Morgan Barron are obviously the big ones. And I wanted to ask you about Samberg, because for me, he was, right up there with Josh Morrissey in terms of, one of the best stories of the year, right? This is his first full-time NHL season after spending a couple of years with the Moose. And I think you'd agree, 24 years old, he's a stud. I think you would agree that, you could easily see him in your top 4 on the left side for many years to come, right? Nobody thinks he's going to be, a 75-point defenseman or anything like that. I think he's probably, going to max out around, 25 to 35 points, something like that. But his strength is in his defensive play. So yeah, I guess the question I was going to ask you is I think a lot of people haven't been paying attention to this. I just think it's interesting in terms of, would you offer him a longer term contract versus a short term contract? Because I think a lot of people would look at Samberg and say, can you really give him a 5 or 6 year deal now? But to me, you would get a little bit more cost certainty. And if you already know that you like Samberg and you want him to be your property, for a really long time, why not sign a long-term deal? I guess just what do you see happening with Samberg? Do you see it being a short-term deal, or would you have no problem giving him a longer-term deal, considering that I think you probably know what you have in Samberg at this point in his career?
I completely agree. I think that RFAs often do want these bridge deals so they can prove themselves and then eventually get more money. Sorry, guys, I have to sneeze.
Harley, you're allergic to Harley?
No, apparently. And the spring, thank you. I might have another one coming because they usually come in 2s. I really, really like Dylan Samberg. I thought specifically in the playoffs in that game 3, despite the unfortunate bounce that led to the Amadio goal, I thought he played very, very well, given the Jets had to roll 5D out the whole game. I think the nice thing about Dylan Samberg is that you don't notice him too much. He's just steady. He doesn't really make too many mistakes. He has all the abilities to be a great top 4 defenseman. I think if you could lock Samberg down to what do you think we'd pay him a year? $3.5 to $4 million if you sign a 4 or 5 year deal.
That's what I was thinking. You're not talking about $5 million plus, because obviously you've got Morrissey and Pionk making that type of money. But I think that's you're in the right neighborhood.
Yeah, I think if you could get him for 4 or 5 years at 3.5, that's pretty good. I think Samberg's only going to emerge and keep crunching those top 4 minutes. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Jets blue line too. There's definitely some weaknesses we have back there, but I think he's a guy that you can really build around going forward, and he's a guy you want to keep. So yeah, I would be open to giving him a longer term contract with if it means that we're paying him a little less, because I don't know how much his value will necessarily increase over the next years, because as you said, I just kind of like know what you're getting with Samberg at this point, but he's a guy that I want on our blue line for sure. And he should feel encouraged about signing with the Jets, because he'll get lots of opportunity to play in the coming years.
Jesse, it was great. He, of course, had 2 assists in the win for Team USA over Finland, but it was for Jets fans like a throwback, because it was Dennis Bayak and Brian Engblom doing the broadcast. I thought I was watching the Jets in 2012 all of a sudden, all over again. It was great to hear. It's always great to hear Dennis make a call. He's the best. And Brian's a big, of course, a Winnipegger. We've had him on the show a million times. Love having him on. Obviously covers the Tampa Bay Lightning now, but it was kind of great to hear those two beauties, as we like to call them, making those calls. And Jesse, I'm surprised you actually didn't have like a thanks for the 18th overall pick when the Leafs got eliminated and the Jets went from the 19th pick to the 18th. I thought maybe you'd throw in a little Jets torment to add to your repertoire.
I can only torment so much, and also, like, it's just so nice to know, like, the Jets are going to get a better draft. Like, I mean, all this stuff for the Leafs was for nothing. So I feel a great sense of relief in that, because I'm not going to lie, I was getting a little worried. Like, if Toronto played the way that they did last night for the whole series, it'd be a different series. The series wouldn't be over. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I feel like every year there seems to be an excuse for the Leafs. Every year it's something new. And like this year, it's like, oh, we ran into a hot Bobrovsky. But it's like, what, Matthews had no points in this series? Like, what? I actually just tweeted too.
I can't believe that. I still can't believe he had no points in the series.
It's insane. It's insane. And even like, regardless of what's happening with the cap, because McDavid's obviously going to get a lot more money, but by the time Matthews signs, he will get more money than McDavid, I'm sure, just because of what will happen in the coming years with the cap. But he shouldn't be paid even with the cap rising, he shouldn't be paid a cent more than McDavid, because he has not done anything in the playoffs. If you're a Leafs fan, you're actually wondering, okay, well, we lost. At least that might help make the argument that Matthews' contract, he's not going to make as much money as he thinks he should. No way. I mean, someone might pay it, but like he shouldn't. Like, and that's the problem with the Leafs in the first place. They just gave a ton of money to these guys who hadn't done anything. They trusted everything in these kids who haven't shown a thing about winning, and it has not paid off. And you look at like the Tampa Bay Lightning, what they did with, like, I don't know, I feel like they've got some really good contracts on their team, guys who know that like they can't take 11 million, they might have to take less than 10 million, and they were able to win. So
also helps when you don't pay tax.
Yeah, it also helps when you don't pay tax. That's a great point. But even the Jets, like the Jets have so many good contracts on their roster, and it just kind of sucks that we haven't really taken that next step to maybe where we should. But I don't know. I tweeted too. If I'm the Chicago Blackhawks, I'm throwing the bag at Matthews next summer. Like, if he becomes available somehow, and the Leafs and he just wants to see what his options are, kind of like a Tavares situation. I mean, Chicago makes sense. They've got tons of. Whether they can make a trade or acquire him, they have a lot of good prospects. They have Connor Bedard on the way. Imagine having it's a big city. It would. I think Matthews would thrive in Chicago with Bedard. I think they're building something huge there, and I don't know. I feel like, especially Chicago, everything that what happened to them, scum. They're like pretty scummy. What happened with that franchise? Oh my goodness, did they ever luck out on getting Bedard? Because they didn't deserve him, but they got him. And it just seems like, they went through that really rough patch, and obviously everything that happened with the organization is inexcusable. And it's like, now it's almost like we're moving on to a new stage with like Bedard and potentially other stars joining the team.
Interesting.
Chicago. They didn't deserve him. Sorry, they didn't deserve him.
It's okay. That was a good little rant there. I appreciate it. Jesse Pollock, our good friend, TSN bar down, made it out of Maple Leaf Square last night unscathed. Show us Harley one last time, and then we'll let you go.
She's bundled up. Harley,
okay, I don't want to disturb a sleeping dog. I know that rule. There you go. Hi, Harley.
Hey, Harley. Italian Greyhounds are an incredible breed. They're very cuddly. It's my girlfriend's dog. So just a reminder. It's not my dog, but she's my other girlfriend.
There you go. Jesse, thanks, buddy. Have a great Saturday.
Thanks, guys. You guys are beauties. Appreciate you having me.
We'll do it again real soon. There he goes. Jesse Pollock from TSN's Bar Down joining us this morning. We go to break and come back with more Jets talk, RFAs, Namestnikov, things of that nature. Up next, hour number 2. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. Going to be talking about the Jets. Going to be joined by Adam Kimmelman of NHL.com at the bottom of the hour. Of course, nice to see so many of you in the chat. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button. Don't get Dave M mad. He is not a good person when he is mad, let me tell you. Smash the like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave us some feedback here, there, and everywhere regarding.
Dave is actually one of the nicer people I've ever seen when he's mad. He's a very gentle person in general.
Have you ever seen him
you on the other hand, Drew, when you don't get your morning bagel, I mean, you turn
Fury.
into like the ultimate warrior.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually the inspiration for Mad Max Fury Road when I don't get my morning bagel. It's a little known fact.
That's a good reference.
Thank you. I lose my mind a
little
bit.
2 men enter, 1 man leave.
Yes, and as long as he gets his bagel, then I just sit quietly in the corner. That's my philosophy in life. I want to talk about Vladislav Namestnikov. Obviously, for the Winnipeg Jets, he was an acquisition at the trade deadline that didn't really garner a ton of attention when it happened. You know, he'd been bounced around the league a lot over the last number of years. Probably, the definition of journeyman. He's a guy who, of course, is an unrestricted free agent at season's end. So he's now, going to be able to explore his options. How much of a priority, from your estimation, gentlemen, should the Jets place on trying to get him back under contract for next year? For a team in the Jets that have for so long really searched for what I'll describe as bona fide bottom 6 NHL players. as opposed to sort of their throwing what sticks at the wall and hoping it turns into a bottom six player. Namestnikov, I don't think anybody would argue, is a bona fide NHL player. Played higher in the Jets lineup, since coming over at the trade deadline. How much of a priority should the Jets place on keeping Namestnikov under contract for next year and maybe subsequent years after that, Ezzy?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think it's something that you should put, a certain degree of priority on. We obviously know that, players like Pierre-Luc Dubois and Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, the core four, Connor Hellebuck, I mean, those are the guys that, are at the center of the direction, possible direction of where the Jets are going to go, right? But yeah, Namestnikov, after being acquired at the trade deadline, was a useful player, right? And you mentioned that he can play up into the top six. When you consider that when Mark Scheifele was moved to the wing, Dave, I mean, that you don't really have the option to do that if you don't have a player like Namestnikov with the ability to play on the second line in the middle, right? So Namestnikov is a guy that we know can play on the wing, can play up the middle. I mean, ideally, if Cole Perfetti is healthy, I mean, you expect Perfetti to be on the wing in your top six. And that's something else that, I'm sure we're going to talk about, as we head into the summer here. Like, is Cole Perfetti an option up the middle for the Jets? I think most people would say probably not right now. You would rather use him on the wing. But I think more so the question is, like, can Perfetti at some point in his career, boys, be a center? Because obviously he was a natural centerman, right? But back to Namestnikov, I think, what was he making? 1.25 million, Drew, something like that. I think we were throwing those numbers back and forth. So it was
1.25 was his contract, but I think there was a salary retention involved there. That's what the Jets had to pay him because his cap hit was actually $2.5 million.
Okay, so $2.5 million.
He signed in Tampa last year in July for 1 year at $2.5 million.
Okay, so there you go. So $2.5 million, and you would expect that to be very similar, right? Like, I don't know if if you're Namestnikov's agent, I obviously don't know who his agent is. But let's say that you're his agent can't go in, and negotiate, a $1 million a year raise. I mean, I just don't. I see him being a guy that's probably going to be right around that salary, maybe a little bit more. But let's just say it's $2.5 million for the sake of the argument. You could have a player that exactly what you're getting, can play center, can play wing, and can probably give you, in between 30 and 40 points, and that's what you want for a bottom six forward. So I do think, he's a guy that the Jets should consider re-signing. I have no idea if they are going to re-sign him, but when you consider that players like Carson Kuhlman, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, Saku Manalainen, I mean, there's going to be turnover in the Jets' bottom six. You wonder if he's a guy that you sign. And again, I don't think you're signing him to a 5-year deal. He's 30 years old or 29 years old. I think you'd probably be signing him to a 1 or 2 year deal, Dave. But I think, it's definitely something the Jets should consider. And again, like I said, I have no idea if Namestnikov is going to be back as a Winnipeg Jet, but I do think he has some usefulness. Is he replaceable? Yeah, he's absolutely replaceable. But for a guy that can play center or wing, can provide some offense, he's responsible defensively. Like, he's a skilled player. Drew mentioned he's a journeyman, but there's a reason why, he was signed by the Lightning. I mean, the Lightning are not a joke organization. In fact, they're a multiple Stanley Cup winner. So, yeah, if you can get him on a year for $2.5 million, and he's a guy that can, play on your third line, maybe even your fourth line, I think you definitely consider it.
Well, I think the point you're making, or the point that one of the points I think is the fact that you need to have someone who has some flexibility, but you also have to keep in perspective that you're signing Namestnikov not to be in your top six. You're signing Vladimir Namestnikov to be ideally maybe being part of a third line that can score, which is what we've been talking about with his Jets team for so long.
Lowry, Barron, Namestnikov. What's wrong with that?
Sure. And again, because the problem with the Jets is they've often had guys playing one level above because they don't have that organizational depth. So, a guy like Namestnikov, sure, you sign him because he's rep by Dan Milstein of Gold Star, so who seems to have all the Russian players.
That's the thing, Dave. I was thinking Milstein because he represents so many Russian players, but I obviously didn't know. So there you go.
Yeah, and I had to look it up as just so I didn't have that one on the old brain, but I checked it up courtesy of our friends at Puckpedia. But I will say that, he is the kind of player who has a versatility. So if you do need a guy in a pinch to go up and play a game or two, in the top six or at center, whatever it is, that he has that versatility. He seems to have, meshed well here in Winnipeg. We know he's basically a North American style player. He's been here since he was like 15 years old. So he's been pretty much half his life has been, in North America.
Yeah.
Not that really matters, but just, whatever. It's another factor that he's comfortable over here. And I could see him signing, like you said, a guy like that at 30 is going to want some cost certainty. He's going to want some term certainty. So you would imagine he's probably, with Tampa, you're more likely to sign a 1-year deal. Maybe with the Jets, you can finagle a 2-year deal. But the way his game plays, he doesn't play a heavy game. He doesn't play a hard game in the sense that it's not taxing on him. And so, I don't know about his durability through the course of his career in terms of injuries and that sort of thing. But
he's usually pretty. I mean, this year he played 77 games. He played 57 with Tampa, 20 with the Jets, not including the playoffs. Last year he played 75 games.
Right.
So he, for the, the 1920, maybe he played a little less games, but he's generally been pretty healthy and been a pretty consistent presence in the lineups of the teams that he's played for.
And I would say, guys, sorry, Drew, I was going to say that, pardon me, Dave, I think one of the reasons I think, as you guys know, the reason why he's moved around a little bit is because of that lack of offense. And he's been known to go through, 5 to 15 game stretches where he's not providing offense. We talked about it. He's not a 60-point guy. He's more of a 30 to 35 point guy, if that at this point in his career, right? But he's
career high is 44 back in 17-18 with Tampa when he had 20 goals and 24 assists.
Right, and I'm not saying that he can't get to that level again. I'm just saying, I don't think you're necessarily expecting him to be a 20, 45 point guy. If you're expecting him to be a kind of 20 to 30 point guy on your third line. And I think with Morgan Barron too, this ties in nicely with Morgan Barron, who we talked to Jesse Pollock about Barron. I think, are you not looking to sign Barron longer term? I think a bridge contract is absolutely a possibility here, but I think it's nice to know that you have, the certainty of a guy like Barron and a certainty with a guy like Namestnikov. And there's going to be opportunities for some young players to make the lineup next year. And we don't know what's going to happen with Scheifele or Dubois, but I just think Namestnikov's an interesting one. We said, he's replaceable. But there's not a lot of guys that, 30-year-old guys that you can get for $2.5 million a year that can play center or wing on your third line, but also can play on your second line and be not just be like a place filler. He's actually a very talented player. So I think, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him.
I would argue that the best versions of the Jets have had a guy who is sort of that Swiss Army knife, who's able to play up and down your lineup. You look back, a guy like Michael Frolik, if you want to go, a number of years
or
back.
Matty
Perreault. And the Jets, Namestnikov could sort of fit in that sort of mold of those kind of guys, not necessarily playing the same style of game, but playing that if he's in your bottom of your lineup, you're comfortable with him there. You're not trying to pound a round peg into a square hole, playing him in the bottom of the lineup. And then should the injury bug bite, or should you need to change things up for whatever reason, maybe you can elevate him in your lineup a little bit and play him in a higher role, not long-term, not for 82 games. You're not penciling him in as one of your top 6 and saying, well, we're done with that for the rest of the year. But a guy who can move up and down your lineup, can play in a lot of different roles, can play in a lot of different situations. The Jets haven't had a guy like that as of late. And I look at what a team like Seattle is doing, where they don't have any superstar forwards or anything. They certainly don't. They have a bunch of NHL regulars in their lineup.
They're the prototypical 3 second line team.
Right. Something like that. Or you look at what Carolina's doing, all of their stars are out of their lineup, and you look at how they're sort of performing. I think the Jets need more balance and certainly more contribution and more NHL caliber, no questions about it, players in the bottom of their lineup. And Namestnikov, in my estimation, would be one of those guys. He's not a tweener. He's not a guy that you're grabbing off waivers. No offense to Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, that you're grabbing and hoping that he's going to play 82 games and develop into an NHL regular. He's not a Carson Kuhlman where you're trying to see, if you can squeeze NHL regular minutes out of a guy who probably belongs at an AHL level, things like that. The Namestnikov is an NHL player. I don't think anybody would argue with that. And that's what the Jets need more of, particularly in the bottom of their lineup. And they're getting it. Morgan Morgan Barron is developing, and so I think Namestnikov just makes a lot of sense for this team. No matter what else happens this offseason, because I mean, he's a small piece of the puzzle and he's not the big headline marquee decision that needs to be made, but acquiring him, I think, would certainly be you're not going to regret acquiring him or re-signing him, because you're not going to have to pay him that much money. And, it's not going to be a 5-year deal that you're signing him to. I think you're probably giving him 2 years.
Yeah, 1 or 2 for sure. Yeah.
Maybe a third year if you really desperately want to keep him. But it's certainly, that would be at the lengthier end of a contract for him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think ultimately what you're saying is you want to see that there's going to look, hockey isn't basketball, right? Like basketball, LeBron James can do what he does. And the Lakers, who were a team that didn't look like they were going to make the playoffs, can now be potentially going to the NBA finals. So you could have, that in basketball.
So you're saying the Jets aren't the dream team, Dave?
Well, no, but I'm saying look,
Dave, you're saying you can't run 6 guys. You can't have a 6 or 7-man bench and or 6 or 7-man roster, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah, there's no super teams in the NHL.
No, and look what happens when you front load your teams, right? I mean, look, the Oilers are on the ropes right now because they're we all agree Ekholm was an amazing addition for that club. We know he got hurt a little bit in yesterday's game. Came back
snipe in game 4, Dave.
Oh my God, unbelievable! But we know that he came back and he got hurt, I think, in the second period. Came back, played the third. But the fact is that I mean, and that goal McDavid scored yesterday was absolutely beyond ridiculous. I mean,
but it's not even beyond ridelicious anymore for him, because it happens every game.
It doesn't matter.
That's the crazy part about it. I know what you're saying, but that's the crazy part.
McDavid is a cheat code.
What I'm suggesting, though, is you're right. I think I think ultimately that's the way you need to be able to build your roster, is to have if you can't have, because the problem is, like, everyone can say, oh, you need a bona fide top center, right? Mark Scheifele. Mark Scheifele's been hurt almost every playoffs for the Jets or suspended. So the fact of the matter is that, you don't have Mark Scheifele in the playoffs when you need him. So it's great that he scored 42 regular season goals. Who cares? What does that do for you in the playoffs? Nothing. So my point is that when you're going to have Mark Scheifele's contract is going to go up, obviously not next year, but the year after. Pierre-Luc Dubois is looking for major money. All your money is going to be sucked up. And again, you're going to run into the same sort of issue. And Connor Hellebuyck. So you're going to have a dearth of depth. And that, to me, is screaming to be a problem. You've got some young prospects coming up the system. Daniel Torgerson, Nikita Kucherov.
Henry Nikkinen plays for the Jets?
Chipperkov.
Oh my God, Dave M. Breaking news here, folks.
The point is, you've got some young pieces who are with the Moose. The Moose are going to be a younger team next year. They're going to be, those guys for the large part will be with the Moose. So
Brad Lambert, Chaz Lucius, those guys are going to play a much bigger role on the Moose next year.
That's right.
Look, so, I don't know that Lambert might not have a role on the Jets next year.
Lambert might be in Seattle next year, guys. I mean, like there's lots of question marks as to what will be for next year. Mm-hmm. I'm just seeing that
should play the game. Where will Brad Lambert play?
Well, we could do that, but I just think that the problem for the Jets is if you're going to load up, you're leaving. Look at Toronto, right? They've got all their money tied into 4 guys, and it again.
I think that's going to change. By the way, I don't see how do you, if Kyle Dubas is still the GM, by the way, but I don't think that's out of the question. I'm not saying that there's going to be a change there, but there has to be. Aren't there similarities? And that's what we didn't get into, Dave, with Jesse, right? I mean, I think there are similarities between the Jets and the Leafs, right? With their cores, different cores, right?
Because the Leafs core is a lot better.
Well, I would agree with that, but and they obviously, they don't have Connor Hellebuyck, right? But when you're talking about Tavares and Matthews and Marner and Nylander, I mean, that core hasn't got it done in the playoffs, right? Like, yes, they got out of the first round this year, but I mean, I think it's time to move on from that core. So I think there's going to be big moves in Toronto, just like we expect there to be big moves here, Dave.
Yeah, and again, like I said, I just think that you have to be very cautious because you have to be realistic. And I think the problem with the Jets in terms of the way development worked is that if you remember, in the courtesy of the 15 draft, they had all these forwards who were ready, but they had a lot of veteran D. They didn't have a lot of developmental D prospects. Now it's the other way around, where a lot of their prospects are defensemen, not that many forward prospects. And you're looking at an absence of forwards and a lot of defensemen. Like, the problem is ultimately, and we're talking about, that's why it comes back to this whole idea of asset management, is the idea that, if you don't think Leon Gawanke is going to be able to play on the right side in your organization, then trade him. if you don't think Johnny Kovacevic is going to play, again, even if you get draft picks back, but the reality for this club is like you just don't have those horses that are going to be ready to go when your club is ready to go. So the timelines are never quite syncing up for this team. And so ultimately, like I said, now we're talking about what are you going to do? Like Ville Heinola is still waiver exempt next year, much to his chagrin. But again, like I said, I really do encourage people because I don't know if it was a year of maturity, but the tenor.
You want to paraphrase maybe what he said?
Well, yeah, okay. The tenor of his conversation was like, I'm going to work my ass off. Like, there's no excuses. And I even kind of gave him one a little bit when I said, do you feel like similar to Dylan Samberg, if you had a bit of runway? And people have to remember, right? Dylan Samberg is a 2017 second rounder who just became a full-time NHLer, right? Ville Heinola is a 2019 first rounder. So there's some years there, even though obviously he was playing pro in Liga. But I'm just saying that, we always have this, guys have to play in the NHL right away. Now, again, his contract works against him. I'm just saying that, yeah, the tenor of his thing was, I'm going to work my ass off. He's going to work on his speed. He's going to work on some strength. But the idea being, I'm going to do what I need to do in order for them not to be able to send me down.
I'm going to win a spot on the back end, and I'm going to force their hand.
That's right. Exactly. And then ultimately, like I said, what you have to look at it as, the Jets team saying, okay, well, now you've got Logan Stanley, who obviously, requested a trade, doesn't want to be here. Here, I'll just read the two quotes from Ville Heinola. On the path to becoming an everyday NHLer, I feel like the biggest part of me is getting my strength up, being able to battle there. Of course, getting faster so I can handle the speed. There's really one thing I want to focus on is getting my speed up, on developing mental toughness. For me, I just try to take it daily. When you can go to bed and say, I worked hard today. I gave everything. You can't give anything more. I feel like that's part of the mental part. And then as to his summer plans, work hard as I can. For my mindset, just going to give everything this summer, not even think about anything else, just working hard. Then it's come here and show that. So, I mean, that if you're a Jets fan and you hear Ville Heinola talking like that, that's really good. You want him to go and have a really good summer, and you want him to come here. I guess my overarching point is that the Jets are going to have a lot of question marks at forward. They're going to have a lot of defensive players. They're going to have a lot of question marks at forward. And to me, that's again, speaks to that organizational depth.
Well, and you would know this better than anybody, Dave. I think you would agree Declan Chisholm is probably more NHL ready than Ville Heinola is at this point, even though Heinola was a first round pick as opposed to Chisholm, who wasn't, right? But I think, maybe I think Heinola is a guy that training camp is probably going to be, more important for him than a lot of players, right? Like, If he has a really good training camp and a really good preseason, he can make the Jets opening night roster. But I think there's a lot of, Jets fans that they look at, what he's done at the NHL level. And every time he makes one mistake, it's like, okay, back down to the AHL, right? And you're right. He's performed near a point per game pace at the American Hockey League level. It's just a matter of time before he makes the NHL. But I think with Morrissey and Samberg and Dylan on the left side, and then you throw in Chisholm, you made a good point earlier. The Jets have more depth on defense on the left side. It's not even close. Mm-hmm. It's a big, I think, organizational weakness right now that they don't really have. I mean, you mentioned Simon Lundmark, Tyrell Bauer, but all due respect to those guys, I mean, they're at least a couple of years away, right? Yeah. I don't know if Tyrell Bauer is even a guy that has a future in the NHL, right? I think you'd agree that he's more of a, if he makes the NHL, it's a third pairing kind of depth role as opposed to Lundmark, who's more skilled. And, maybe you could say his
Dylan DeMello-esque, if you will.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, I think, Heinola is an interesting one. I think, he's going to play NHL games for sure. But I just don't know if he's necessarily, some Jets fans, I think he should be a lock for the top 6 next year. I just don't think that's the case. And you have to step back and be like, okay, yep, he's only 22 years old. It wasn't until 24 that Dylan Samberg really established himself as an NHL defenseman. But for sure, Heinola is a guy that's going to be really interesting to watch throughout training camp, just because he has so much skill. And that once he puts it all together, he's going to be a really good defenseman at the NHL level. But I think, you still just have to be patient with him.
More Jets talk to come on this Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll head to break and bring in Adam Kimmelman of NHL.com. Stay with us. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show rolls on.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show rolls on this Saturday morning. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. Overseas, Nikolai Ehlers is putting Team Denmark on his back. They are up 2-0 over Hungary, noted hockey powerhouse Hungary. Both goals coming off the stick of Nikolai Ehlers, so he's off to a good start in the World Hockey Championships. Looks odd, though. He's wearing number 24, and it just doesn't fit right to me. We're so used to him wearing 27, but in any event, a good start to the IIHF World Hockey Championships for the Jets winger. Pleased to welcome to the program from NHL.com, very familiar with the upcoming NHL Draft and all that is going on in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. Adam Kimmelman joins us on the show. Adam, good morning.
I'm wearing orange, Adam, just for you.
Oh, thank you. It looks good on you.
Yeah, it really brings out the red in Ezzy's eyes, I find. That orange does. Adam, good to see you this morning. How are things?
Things are good. It's very eventful here in the Philadelphia area, so it's a good time.
Yes, it's never a dull moment usually with the Flyers. Over the course of the years that we've been doing this program, the Flyers are always usually pretty good for some sort of news, whether going way back it's Dry Island with Jeff Carter and Mike Richards or whatever the topic of the day might be. The Flyers make news, and they made news this week in bringing a whole new regime and sort of removing the interim from the Danny Briere's title as general manager. And a bit of at least I didn't see this coming, and you're more tied into the Flyers, of course, than I am, Adam. Keith Jones being named president of the organization. Let's start with that one. Why Keith Jones to get the Flyers back on track after so many years of missteps?
Well, I think if you've watched hockey at any point on a national basis in the last 20 years, you've heard Keith's analysis. You know how smart a person he is as far as breaking down plays, breaking down players, knowing what works, what doesn't. So the hockey acumen is obvious. And the attitude that he brings, the Flyers very much stressed having things be very collaborative and very transparent between the hockey operations side and the business side. And as far as making sure the messaging coming out of the front office is equal and spread and obvious, and everybody knows it, and it's positive because they do need to win back some of the fan base after the last couple of seasons. If you watch games there, attendance was very soft. There were a lot of nights where the fans just didn't come out. That's where you have the advantage of having someone like Keith Jones, who is a popular presence in Philadelphia, has been going back to his playing days in the late 90s, whether it's Flyers broadcast, whether it's doing the most popular morning sports talk radio show for, at least 10 years. He is a known commodity in the community. He's a really smart hockey person. And it's going to be, as surprising as it was, I can see the logic behind making this decision to make Keith Jones in this role.
Adam, our good friend Anthony Sanfilippo, who's covered the Flyers for many years, I'm sure you're familiar with Anthony as well. He wrote an article for crossingbroad.com a number of months ago, sort of that highlighted the insular nature of the Flyers and their recent hiring practices. Not even recent, going back a number of decades, I would argue, their hiring practices. Was this a time where the Flyers needed to sort of go outside the family and bring somebody in? I've seen some criticism to that effect online, that this was the time to not hire somebody that is so familiar with the Flyers organization.
I've read that countless times over the years, more so recently, that, the Flyers can only hire people who have Flyers connections. And, the guys who they just hired are former Flyers, but that shouldn't stain them, I don't think, in any way. Just because Keith Jones played 3 seasons for the Flyers and has worked for them as a broadcaster, does that make him any less of a smart hockey person? Danny Briere played 6 years, 7 years with the Flyers. This is a guy with a degree from Wharton, the University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League educated. So he played for the Flyers. I don't know how much of a, everybody wants to kind of focus on this constant existence of the Broad Street Bullies era, and everybody has some sort of relationship to Bobby Clark. So if you didn't play with Clark or work with Clark or know Clark, you can't work for the Flyers. It's nonsense. Just because these guys wore the Flyer jersey does not paint them in that same light. These are smart guys, hockey educated guys, and I think it almost works to their advantage because they have a passion for making the organization, hoping the organization succeeds because they're invested in it. I don't think the fact that, they're stuck in some archaic definition of what hockey should look like just because they wore a Flyers jersey. I don't agree with that narrative at all.
Fair enough. And Adam, I wanted to ask you about, looking forward, because I think, you would agree, and most Flyers fans would agree, that was a very disappointing season, not making the playoffs. I don't know, how many people expected them to make the playoffs, especially with how good the Eastern Conference was this year. But when you look at the Flyers, you've got the 7th overall pick coming up, and we want to ask you about the upcoming 2023 NHL Draft, because obviously it's going to be a very exciting draft with a lot of good players. The Jets now will be picking, 18th overall? 18th overall. There we go. It was 19th or 18th overall, but now we know it's 18th overall. But, I look at the Flyers, and you've got some exciting young prospects like Cutter Gauthier, who was amazing. I think you'd agree, for Boston College this past season. But what is priority number one for Keith Jones and Daniel Briere and this new regime? Because obviously, you could look up and down this Flyers roster, and I think you would agree there's a lot of holes everywhere.
Well, there are, and the draft is the main point of focus right now, starting with the combine coming up here the first week of June, and then going down to Nashville for the draft. They have the number 7 pick, and it's a pick they can't get wrong. It's an incredibly talented crop of players, especially skilled forwards, and that's what they need to add into the organization at all levels is more skill. And you mentioned Cutter Gauthier, and you saw, the kind of season he had at college, and he'll be back for another season at college next season. You saw what Tyson Forrester did in the brief time he came up to the Flyers, adding that element of skill, the strong shot. They need more players like that to come into the organization. Whatever direction they go with number 7, they have to hit it. And that's sort of been the marching order now since, once it was pretty obvious that they were going to finish near the bottom of the standings. And certainly they hope to move up, and Connor Bedard would have certainly change the plans moving forward. But well, for sure. But where they are at number 7, I think they have the chance to get a really, really good player who's going to be a foundational piece for them when they get back to being playoff contenders.
Adam, we are a Manitoba-based show, so I'm going to quickly just revert back, as you mentioned Bobby Clarke, and of course he's from Flin Flon. So I just want to ask you quickly, we know he was like a senior advisor. Has his role changed in Philadelphia, or will he still kind of maintain that role within the organization?
Well, I think, I think people had sort of an outsized view of what exactly Bobby Clarke's role was under Chuck Fletcher's leadership. I think Bob was there just as someone to lean on. Bob was not setting policy or dictating moves, nor was Paul Holmgren, nor was Bill Barber. I know those names also came up a lot. They were there if Chuck had a question. If he said, hey, this is what I'm seeing. You guys who are Hall of Famers, Stanley Cup champions, guys who have built teams, built successful teams, what are you seeing? What do you think? And then Chuck would, take their opinion under advisement, as he should, because they're smart hockey people, and make his decisions based on that with his level of experience. And I'm sure Danny's going to be the same way. If you've got assets, use them, but you don't have to necessarily rely on them 100% of the time. And Danny's going to have his own people that he trusts, that he's going to want to bring in, that he's going to be able to try to lean on to give him advice. Say, hey, I'm seeing this. What are you guys seeing? And at the end of the day, though, Danny Briere has to make the decisions. It's his job to make those determinations on what the roster is going to look like and what decisions are going to be made as far as, hirings, firings, trading, signings, scouting department, development department, however he wants to build it. It is 100% his thing now. And he has to make those decisions. And he can have as many advisors as he wants, but he has to be the ultimate decision maker.
Adam Kimmelman of NHL.com, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. Adam, sort of shifting focus a little bit to the NHL Draft after the draft lottery came out earlier this week. You and your colleague Mike Morreale of NHL.com came out with a mock draft after the Blackhawks obviously win the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. Not going to ask you a Connor Bedard related question. Seems unnecessary. But that second spot, you and Mike Morreale both had Adam Fantilli there going second overall to the Anaheim Ducks. How much consideration did you give to somebody else other than Fantilli? We know some of the other names that have been talked about. Leo Carlsson, of course, comes to mind out of Sweden. But was it sort of it was a Bedard and Fantilli, no questions asked for that second spot?
I can't speak for Mike, but I know for myself, there was as little hesitation as I had at putting Connor Bedard at number 1. I had just about the same little amount of decision-making to put Adam Fantilli at number 2. If you go back and you look at last year's draft, I think if Fantilli was part of that cohort, I think he would have been the number 1 pick. The way he was able to dominate NCAA hockey as an 18-year-old, that's a NCAA hockey, for whatever you want to say about it. It's a weekend league. It's also a 20-year-old league. Mm-hmm. And he walked in there as an 18-year-old and was the best player on one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country, led all NCAA players in scoring, tied for the lead in goals, was a dominant player. And he brings NHL ready size at 6'2" and 195 pounds. The one thing Connor Bedard, interestingly enough, does not have. So when you look at all the benefits to what an Adam Fantilli could potentially bring to your organization, and this is saying something in a very strong crop, to me, he was no doubt about the second best player available.
Adam, I wanted to ask you about Zach Benson, because obviously we're a Winnipeg-based show. Dave M. was at Game 1 yesterday of the WHL final between the Seattle Thunderbirds and the Winnipeg Ice. As you know, Benson led the Ice in scoring, which is impressive considering they've got, Matthew Savoy and Connor Geekie and so many others. And maybe this ties into the Flyers at number 7. If the Flyers are able to, if he's still there at number 7, is there any way that the Flyers pass up on Zach Benson?
Well, I mean, to me, yes. And if you look at my mock draft on NHL.com, I had them taking Oliver Moore from the U.S. national team in that spot. But again, Benson is part of that group with Moore, with Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault from the U.S. national team program. Dalibor Dvorsky from the AIK in Sweden, Edmund Schala from Brno in the Czech Republic, as part of that group of really extremely talented, high skill, high end forwards with huge ceilings, guys who can be top line players that you can build your offense around. And you mentioned Benson on a team with 2 first-round picks in Connor Geekie and Matt Savoy, led them in scoring, was probably one of, if not their best player in the playoffs. He's got a work ethic that, sort of reminds me a little bit of a Brendan Gallagher. Just a guy who isn't really big, but he's feisty and he'll get to the front of the net and fight for his spots and score when he gets there. So I like Benson, but, again, there's so little separation once you get past Bedard and Fantilli of that next group. And it's going to be a really every team's going to have it in a different way. And some teams could have him 4-5, some could have him 9-10. But I think Zach Benson is a top 10 talent for this draft. Where he goes, that's going to be the fun when we get to Nashville.
Let me tell you, I watched him yesterday, Adam. He is a phenomenal young man, and his motor doesn't stop. The second best player probably in the WHL this season. Kicked off game 1 with a breakaway chance. Didn't score, but you could see his desire to get to that net and be the guy. Zach Benson is going to be a heck of a player in the NHL one day. I know your mock draft that you guys did went to 16. We know the Jets are going to be drafting in the 18th spot, courtesy of the Panthers knocking off the Leafs yesterday. Who would you see the Jets picking in that spot? Who do you see as a guy who, not necessarily one guy, but a number of players who could fall in that range that could be a target of the Winnipeg Jets?
Well, I think there's so many outstanding forwards. A guy like Colby Barlow could be something they're looking for. Just a high-end goal scorer, a guy who's a volume shooter who, probably still needs to work on his skating a little bit, but a guy who looks like he can be a real big-time goal producer. Andrew Crystal playing out in Kelowna is another guy that I've really liked. He's got that chip on his shoulder that he plays with, that feistiness that, can really – you've seen it with Matthew Tkachuk in the Florida Panthers. When you bring that certain attitude, that certain element to a locker room, it can sort of invigorate and spread in a positive way. And I think Andrew Crystal could be that kind of player. So there are a lot of guys out there. If they look on the defensive side, a guy like Lucas Dragicevic is someone who could still be available for them. Etienne Morin, defenseman from Moncton in the Quebec League. Dragicevic, I really like just the times I've watched him just on video. The offensive head for the game is really, really top end to me. I love the way he moves the puck. There are some elements in his game that need improvement, certainly on the defensive side. But to me, what I've seen on the offensive side of it, he looks like he's going to be a really good player. And if he can fill out the other parts of his game, I think he has a chance to be a special player.
A couple more for you, Adam, then we'll let you get on with your Saturday. Matvei Michkov, over playing in the KHL, played for Sochi, made a real impact. His contract status, he's under contract in the KHL for a number of years still, until the end of 2025-26, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think that's going to impact his spot in this draft, or are teams prepared to let him just do his seasoning overseas and they'll get him to North America whenever they do?
I think every team's going to have he is going to be the most difficult decision for every team outside of Chicago and Anaheim, I think. Because if you look at raw skill, he might be the second or third most skilled player in this draft. But the factor of the contract and where he's playing leads to some questions. So, I compare it to Kirill Kaprizov. When Minnesota drafted him, they had to wait 5 years. It was the third general manager in Minnesota who got him. Chuck Fletcher picked him. Paul Fenton went in and out there, and now Bill Guerin gets the benefit from it. So to me, you have to be able to say, okay, we're going to take this top, say, 5 pick, and we're going to put it away, and we're not going to see it for at least 4 years. And we're going to have to continue to build, knowing, hopefully, by 26, 27, this guy's going to be able to come over. So I don't know. There are some managers who are going to say, we can't wait that long. Our window is a little bit narrower. Like a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets, you have Johnny Gaudreau would have 2 years left on his contract, I believe, by the time Michkov comes over in 26. Patrick Laine would be out of contract. So those are your two biggest players, your two most valuable guys that you'd almost would be using up the best years of their career. They need someone who's a little bit more flexible and able to come over. So to me, when I was looking at it, Leo Carlsson seems like a better option for them because he can come over as an 18-year-old, step right into their lineup and be a really good player for them. Michkov, I don't know if they have the patience to wait. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's sort of how I looked at it, and that's how it played out in my mock draft, at least. So other teams might be more willing to say, hey, we have the patience. That's why I have him at number 5 to Montreal, because they've assembled this group of nice young players, Suzuki and Caulfield and Slafkovsky and Doc, and those guys sort of might be gelling into contender status when Michkov would be ready to come over at 26 at age 22. And he almost becomes, instead of that high-end free agent piece, like a Johnny Gaudreau with Columbus, you get him on an entry-level contract for high-end production at low value. So I think, to me, that's what was my thinking, at least having him to go to Montreal at number 5. But I think he is going to be – there might be more discussion about him than any other player in the top 10 of this draft.
It's very interesting. And last question for you, Adam. Obviously, there aren't going to be, any Manitoban players taken as high as last year with Connor Geekie and Denton Matejchuk. Carson Bjarnason, goaltender for the Brandon Wheat Kings from Carberry, Manitoba. He's the top-ranked North American goaltender for NHL Central Scouting. And I'll admit, I don't know anything about any top-ranked European goaltenders. I'm not sure if you have any European goaltenders ranked higher than Bjarnason. Is Bjarnason a guy that you see kind of being more of a second-round pick? And what's kind of stood out to you about Bjarnason this season with the Wheaties?
Well, I think the fact that he was a really good goalie, athletic, big, everything you want to see in a goalie, even though Brandon didn't really have a very good season this year. And I think, we talk about goalies being sort of a different breed. He's a guy, just from getting to know him the little bit that I have, smart kid, good head for the game. He's got some interesting hobbies. He's a musician. He designs his own pad. So there's a lot to like about Bjarnason on the ice. There's a lot to like about him off the ice, because to me, no matter who it is, goalie, forward, defenseman, you're looking to bring in good people as much as you are good players to your locker room. Like, we've all covered hockey. We've all seen what it looks like when the room maybe isn't working the way it should be, when attitudes are a little bit different, when guys are maybe not all leaning the same way.
You are talking to a Winnipeg-based hockey show, after all.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the direction I was heading. But at the same time, we've seen what happens when it does go the right way. And you can have a lot more. It's a lot easier to have success when everybody's able and willing to trust each other and pull the rope the right way. To me, Carson Bjarnason seems like, as good of a goalie he is, he seems like a good person and someone that you'd want to add to your locker room. So I don't know if he's a first-round pick. My guess would be, if he does, it would be somewhere after pick number 20. But I'm fairly confident he will be the first goalie selected this year in the draft, where we'll find out when we get to Nashville.
Adam Kimmelman is with NHL.com. He'll be leading up the draft coverage from now until the time we all gather in Nashville for revelry, and certainly no alcoholic beverages whatsoever. Adam, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Have a great rest of your Saturday. We'll talk again real soon.
See you on Broadway, Adam.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
There he goes, Adam Kimmelman, joining us on the program this morning.
Are we going to the draft? Is that an option this year? Because I have some air miles.
You have air miles, but if you go to the draft, Ezzy, I'm strongly going to suspect that Naomi's going to tell you, don't bother coming home, because the locks will be changed and the divorce proceedings will be in the mailbox.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. As long as you're aware of that, that's the important part. That's the crucial part of the whole thing. But we will have, of course, in-depth draft coverage leading up to the big event in Nashville at the end of June, and then free agency starting a couple days later. And if I'm not mistaken, free agency will be on a Saturday. I believe Canada Day is a Saturday this July. So we will have, of course.
You think they would change it? I hate that they do it on Canada Day.
Of course, they would never do it on the 4th of July.
No, it's so disrespectful to me that they do it on Canada Day. I actually just drives me absolutely bonkers that it just shows such disregard for Canada Day to have the free agency on July 1st. I think it's terrible.
Especially because, the idea that, Canadians are just going to stay at home, and watch free agency.
It's arrogance, of course, but
yeah. I mean, do it the day before. I don't care when you do it. Just don't do it.
June 30th.
I remember the Jets and the Oilers a couple of years ago played on Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
On Canadian Thanksgiving, they played a game, and I'm thinking to myself, you don't play any hockey games on American Thanksgiving. The only sport that plays on American Thanksgiving is, of course, the NFL.
Yeah, but Canadian Thanksgiving is like, that's true. I mean, but it's Thanksgiving doesn't have the same importance. You know that it's bigger. It's way bigger in the U.S. than it is here. Like I always look at, like I don't even think growing up our family really did anything on Thanksgiving. I don't know. Maybe that's just
we didn't. No, we didn't either. But I mean, Drew's point is the overarching point is the fact that again, the NHL does what's fine for the States. They don't do.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt, Dave, that
Canadian.
So it's more geared towards the U.S.
Yeah, I just think it's disrespectful. I think it's a day to honor our country, and it should be focused on that and being with family, not covering the NHL. Having said that, I will be wherever I need to be covering the NHL. So see you later, family.
Yeah. Having said that, stay tuned to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show free agency preview.
Exactly right. I think the reason why we didn't do a lot of big Thanksgiving things largely is because it falls usually so close to the Jewish high holidays. So you've done a lot of family things right before or right around them. But for a lot of other people,
it's that big here. Like I don't know.
Well, I think for a lot of other families, it is, Ezzy. I think it's growing in importance, is what I'm saying. But I agree. Maybe. It's the disrespectful side of things. If you wouldn't do it for the American, hockey audience, you shouldn't do it for the Canadian hockey audience. Is what it boils down to. But again, most of my protestation.
Why don't we just celebrate Thanksgiving with the U.S.? Like I don't understand why we just don't do that.
Well, I think I'm not really sure about the exact reason for it, but there's a lot of Canadians who certainly have adopted U.S. Thanksgiving as an important day on the calendar.
That's the real Thanksgiving. Let's be honest here.
Well, no, it's not. It's just when you sleep next to the elephant, everything seems bigger
Laura,
when it happens
will
in the U.S.
Agree with me.
What's that?
Laura will definitely agree with me.
Laura,
American Thanksgiving is the real Thanksgiving.
Well, she would agree with you.
I'm a proud Canadian, but let's be honest here.
But Laura's American, so yes.
We're talking about like the Canadian Thanksgiving is checkers, and the American Thanksgiving is chess.
Well, it's not. Anyways,
all right, Drew, move on. Drew, you've lost this conversation.
What other holidays can we talk about?
What else? I'm sure we can find other holidays. I want to talk about Kevin Stenlund, though. That's what I wanted to talk about. We've sort of touched on a few of the RFAs for the Winnipeg Jets so far this year. At least sort of the
pending UFA or RFA.
RFA is a pending RFA.
Manalainen, I'm thinking of as a UFA.
Manalainen's a UFA, and I don't expect that there's going to be a huge push on re-signing Saku Manalainen. I could be wrong. Maybe the organization likes him for depth or for penalty killing or whatever it is. But
he's a good penalty killer, but you're not getting a lot of offense from Saku.
You are not getting a lot of offense out of him. But Kevin Stenlund's sort of an interesting player because he was a guy that got signed, of course, out of he was with the Blue Jackets organization. He came in, and despite the similarities in how he looks to Blake Wheeler, which was certainly a good sort of training camp chuckle-a-thon, he came in and he played a significant role for this Winnipeg Jets team. I would say an unexpected significant role, sort of anchoring that fourth line center role that everyone sort of thought was going to go to David Gustafsson. It didn't due to injury and other circumstances, but Stenlund came in and played 54 games for the Winnipeg Jets this year. He played all 5 games in the playoffs as well. Again, RFA, so it's not like it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to keep him. But do you think that there's a role for Kevin Stenlund moving forward with this Winnipeg Jets team?
There is, and I want Dave M to get in here because the only problem that I have is if you bring back Stenlund, how does that affect David Gustafsson? Right? Like, and we saw that this year, right? I think Dave would agree, Gustafsson, it's not ideal that he's a healthy scratch for extended periods of time. It's not like he was a healthy scratch for 50 games or anything like that, but I think it did create a bit of an issue by squeezing Gustafsson out, right, Dave? So that's the only thing with me. Like if you're signing Stenlund, like first off, do you have a replacement for him already? And I would say yes. And that I just mentioned who that is. It's David Gustafsson, who's obviously younger and who has a much higher ceiling. Gus Bus struggled this year, right? I don't even remember if he ended up scoring a goal or not. I don't think he did. But I think, everybody would agree that he has a very bright future if he does remain a member of the Jets. So I would lean towards more bringing, a Namestnikov back as opposed to Stenlund. But I mean, Stenlund, look, he wins faceoffs. He kills penalties. He can chip in a little bit of offense. He's not going to cost you a lot, as Drew mentioned, right? So Stenlund's an interesting one, but I worry a little bit, Dave, if he kind of pushes Gustafsson a little bit to the side, right? I think you ideally want Gustafsson playing up the middle, right, Dave?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question. And I think you're right, Drew. I mean, but the one thing I was going to say about Stenlund, he had a good attitude. I remember when he came down, was assigned to the Moose, and I talked to him about just maintaining, a commitment. And he just said, look, they're here. They're watching me. You never know when I'm going to get that call up to go back in the lineup. He got the call back up and he earned a spot, and Rick Bowness trusted him, and Rick Bowness liked him in that role as fourth line center. And so he maintained it for the remainder of the season. And it was partly because he came down to the AHL and continued to play with a good attitude and ensure that, he didn't level off his game didn't deteriorate because he was upset because he was playing in the American Hockey League. So, yeah, I mean, it is an interesting predicament. I think that some of these, I think the greater point that you're making, or the one I'm thinking of, is the fact that it's essentially creating some interesting training camp battles for this upcoming season, right? Is will David Gustafsson, who to me, yeah, he could be a fourth line center. You want him to produce a little bit of offense, obviously, not be a complete black hole, but he's very good on the penalty kill. He's good at faceoffs for the most part. And so he's responsible. And so would you entrust him, or do you want to allow, Stenlund to have that role? I mean, again, like I said, if you move him to the wing, what kind of fourth line are you creating? And now the reality is, to me, is you're creating a fourth line that would at least be defensively responsible, which is of course what you want. But, we've often talked as, having a fourth line with identity, and what is the identity of your fourth line for this Jets club? And you look at some of the teams that are currently in the NHL playoffs and the depth they have into that fourth line, where they can be defensively responsible and score goals, not a ton of goals, but they can still produce occasionally. And I think that's obviously the model the Jets have. And I think it's kind of the basic tenor of this conversation we've had throughout the course of this morning, right? Is the fact that you just want to see things shift down a bit, so the Jets don't necessarily have to rely on guys like the Kuhlmans who don't necessarily produce. You want to be able to have some guys who can be defensively responsible and produce occasionally on that fourth line, not have those guys be your third line guys or second line guys. You need to have that filter down. So to me, that'll be the interesting sort of situation for this Jets club, is, those sorts of training camp battles and how it plays out for, all across the lineup. It's not just, you're right, Ez, it's not just about what's happening on the first line or the second line. The fourth line is just sometimes just as important.
Yeah, and going back to what Drew mentioned, asking what we see happening with Stenlund, I think he's much more valuable than Manalainen, and I think if your fourth line includes Stenlund and Gustafsson, it's going to be a fourth line. I just wonder about the lack of offense, right? Because Gustafsson, I don't think, Dave, anybody expects to be a 75-point guy at the NHL level. But you also got to chip in some offense, right?
That's right.
And he is going to score his first NHL goal eventually, right? Like it's going to. No, he already has an NHL.
No, he has it. Remember, he beat Erik Karlsson in that San Jose game.
Right. Yeah. But what I meant is the goals will eventually come from him. He's a good young player, right? Though. But I think that is definitely something that you have to look at in your bottom two lines. Like, yes, Adam Lowry started to come on towards the end of the season. Morgan Barron, you expect his point totals to go up next year. And Stenlund's not going to cost you much. Like, what are we talking about? 1 year, $1 million, something like that. 2 years, $2 million. Like, he's not a guy.
No, he's not.
That's expensive. What you want. You want players like that. And I think when you consider last whatever it was, July, when the Jets announced that they signed Stenlund and Manalainen, I don't think many Jets fans had super high expectations for either of those two players. So for a guy like Stenlund, who you probably thought was going to play most of the year with the Moose, the fact that he played most of the year with the Jets, he was a useful player. So I could easily see the Jets bringing Stenlund back. But when you're talking about Manalainen, Carson Kuhlman, Jonsson Fjällby, I don't know how many of those guys, if any of those guys, are coming back.
Well, and as you got to look at Jansen Harkins, right? I mean, he had a phenomenal season in the AHL. He really reestablished his scoring touch at the American Hockey League level. He's under contract with the Winnipeg Jets for another year. Again, will not clear waivers. Again, it becomes asset management. He obviously wasn't, he didn't show it, but he obviously wasn't pleased about being in the American Hockey League level. We talked to him. You'll see that. I think that end of season media availability will be out, I think, on Monday. But, again, he didn't allow it to affect his attitude on the ice. And you saw it. I mean, the guy produced, right? 25 goals, 25 assists, 50 points in like 40 something games for Manitoba. So, is there a role for Jansen Harkins on this Jets club? He clearly didn't have a lot of favor with Rick Bowness, but Mikey Esimont, we talked about him. So this team has to figure out what they're going to do in terms of their assets. You spend the time developing these assets. Are you going to give them the opportunity to play? If you're not going to give them the opportunity to play, don't let other teams pick them off for free. Trade them away. Even if you get some draft capital back, at least do something, because again, the Declan Chisholms, the Jansen Harkins, they're not passing through waivers next year. They've done enough that some team is going to say, I'll take a flyer on this guy. Worst case scenario, I get him in my lineup for a bit. Doesn't work out, I throw him back on waivers. We either put him back into the AHL or he ends up, being an NHL guy. So that to me is the big question about this Jets club is using the things that you developed as assets for your team.
Just wanted to quickly say, Drew, I think, those two players, it's good that you bring up Jansen Harkins, because I think you'd agree. At his stage of his career, he's too good for the AHL, right? Like, what more can Jansen Harkins prove at the AHL? And I think that will be telling, right? If the Jets do bring back Kevin Stenlund, that probably means that Harkins is not part of the future.
He's just another one of the litany of question marks surrounding this team. And we know the headline guys, but there's still many guys who are sort of on that tier below that their futures will need to be discussed and figured out over the next few months.
And I was just going to add, like, look, it's incumbent on Jansen Harkins to have a great summer. Like, he needs to come. It's similar to Ville Heinola, what Ville Heinola said to me on Monday. Jansen Harkins has to embody that as well. He has to have a good summer. He has to be ready to go. And if he's ready to go and he earns himself a spot in the training camp, then he's earned himself again, what you did for me yesterday no longer counts. Right. I mean, that works for certain guys, right? That works for the guys who are making salaries north of 5. So the reality is, like, a guy like Neil Pionk, even if he's not playing well, doesn't come out because he's a salaried guy, and that's just the reality. People can pretend it's anything other than that, but but when you're a guy who's not in that realm, you have to work your ass off. And so for Jansen Harkins, this summer is going to be hugely important because, again, he had a very good season in the American Hockey League, but he's going to have to translate that into a very good summer of training and say to the Jets, listen, you're either going to play me or I'm going to play somewhere else. Or, look, the Jets could always trade him at the trade deadline. I'm not saying otherwise. But the fact of the matter is, it's really incumbent on him to take what he was able to do this year and translate it into a really good summer training, and then see what he's able to do for the 23-24 season. And last word, Drew, because I know we're already over time, but last word, because I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on it, because we didn't. I thought we were going to get to it. But 5 days ago, Brian Little, of course, the Jets leader here for many years, was inducted into the Cambridge Sports Hall of Fame and said he would like to end his career as a member of the Winnipeg Jets. Now, that's something that won't matter until July, because he's still got another year of his deal that's with Arizona after the Jets traded it there in 21. But I just thought it was a nice comment, and it just showed the outpouring of love that Brian Little. Again, there's two people now I've noticed on our Instagram, the Illegal Curve Instagram, follow us if you're not, that if I post anything about them, it just goes to, like, I immediately, like, the phone goes brrr, and I have like 150 likes before it's even.
You should post what Brian Little had for lunch today. See how many likes you got.
I will see. But number one, of course, on that list is Dustin Byfuglien. Brian Little, pretty close number 2. I think I posted that he said he wanted to retire as a member of the Winnipeg Jets, and I think it was like 1,300 likes on the Illegal Curve Instagram, which is a big number. So
what a shame the way his career ended, right? Like,
for sure.
It still bothers me, and I think a lot of people, because of how good of a career he had with the Jets, right, Dave? So yeah. I think it's good that you brought that up, because I think it would be fitting. I think that would be the right way for him to end his career. Not even though he had a great career with the Coyotes as well. Obviously, I'm joking. He never played a single game, but I think it just makes a lot of sense for him to end his career as a Jet.
Well, sorry, Drew, quickly. It's effective July 1st. Next year is when his contract's up.
2024.
2024. So he'll basically be able to sign a deal. And the reality is, this organization, it's a no freaking brainer, because what you do is you have him sign, you do a night to honor him, and let me tell you, that's just a win across the board. Because as you're seeing in the chat, and if you love Brian Little, smash that like button. For everybody who's listening to us right now, smash the like button. But look, he always served the community well, and he was a nice guy to deal with, and he was a fan favorite. So you're right, Ez. It was tough to see him go out the way he did back in November of 2019 against your New Jersey Devils. But again, he's still well regarded amongst these parts by fans and media alike.
There you go. That's it for this Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Big thanks to Jesse Pollock. Big thanks to Adam Kimmelman for joining us. In case you missed any of those interviews, they're available on the immediate replay or on the podcast edition of the show. Big thanks to our sponsors. They make the Saturday show, the post-game show, and the website a possibility. Our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Big thanks to everybody for joining us this morning. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, rate us, review us, leave us some feedback. We always like to know what you think about our fine programming. Whatever you have in store for this upcoming weekend, please do it safely. We'll meet you back here.
Huge kid's birthday coming up at 2:00 for me, Drew.
There you go, as he's going to go enjoy a kid's birthday party. Whatever you have in store, remember, illegalcurve.com all throughout the week is updated as necessary.
I'm about to go update it right now.
Every morning. Exactly, Dave M's doing it right now. And we'll be back next Saturday morning with more of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. For Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.